Ladies and gentlemen, we're running just a little bit behind, but we are here nonetheless. I want to thank you guys. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. And tonight, our special guest this evening, rejoining us once again, Mr. Jeff Hall, private investigator. We're going to discuss some things tonight, in particular, truck theft, cargo theft, and a lot of stuff that has been going on with a lot of these dispatch services and people that have been doing some things, doing some unsavory things with manipulating the markets and being able to get access to loads and things of that nature. And we're going to talk about maybe some things to help protect yourself against those things and some things that you might need to be more aware of. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and welcome, first of all, welcome my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How have you been since last week? Since we talked?
We're doing well. Everything is. I can't complain. Things are good. I'm excited about tonight's show because there's been a rash of truck thefts, cargo thefts, and fraudulent activity in the trucking and logistics business. Well, it's not just trucking, it's anybody that owns trucks that has trailers that are loaded with merchandise. Everybody seems to be a target if they don't have damn good security or systems. And I got to say, I was talking to somebody today, and this is part of the issue. I think Jeff can, just before we welcome Jeff on, but I think this might be part of the problem with some of the smaller operators. I was talking to him and he said, well, who are you guys having on tonight? And I said, Jeff Hall. And I told him what our topic was. It's going to be about cargo theft and truck theft. He goes, well, I don't care. Now, this is a one truck owner operator with his own insurance. He says, I don't care. My truck is insured. My cargo is insured. I'm good. And I thought, no, you're not good. You think you're good until something happens. And then all of a sudden you don't have your truck, even if they do find it. It could be a month or two, and the insurance company's not cutting you a check the next day. That's for sure. And they're not cutting your customer, whether it's a broker or direct customer, they're not cutting him a check the next day either. And they're liable to hold money they owe you until they do some due diligence. So, this is some of the misconceptions out there that I think are breeding some of the lethargy from some of the members of the trucking community. And with no further ado, I want to welcome our special guest, Jeff Hall, back on the Rates and Lanes podcast. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Chuck. Good evening, Muhammad. As always, it's an honor. Thanks for the invite.
Well, thanks for joining us. What do you think of what I just said? Is that not part of the issue?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, truckers, and also I think a lot of times, unfortunately, even shippers have that attitude. A lot of times they feel that, hey, if we lose it, insurance company's going to pay for it, and they'll make more phones, they'll make more computers, and that's the prevailing attitude. But not to everybody. So some people still just have a very moral issue about theft, and it's something they can't stand, and they despise it. But there are those out there that kind of just shrug their shoulders, and that's part of business.
Yeah, it's not. It's a very expensive part of business.
How much has business picked up, Jeff, in terms of not only necessarily your business, but as far as the increase in cargo thefts or load theft, truck theft? How much has things really has it really ramped up from that standpoint?
No doubt. I mean, not only ours, but the entire industry. I mean, I'm in touch with people every day, and it's two of the biggest ones we've had out that are affecting our I say our country, but I don't think it's just germane to the United States. You guys probably have the same thing, but we've got, particularly in Southern California, two types. I think we discussed it during the last show. The one that has been unprecedented with over 100 thefts since September of 20 with the same group, just in essence following loads that are leaving these major computer manufacturers. And we finally caught a couple of main people from that, but yet it continues. It's like they're continuing with the B team.
We're next man up.
Yeah, there's a lot sloppier work, but they're still doing it. I was out in Lake Havasu about 3 weeks ago on one, and from that we got some good evidence. We recovered impounded a vehicle that was used. We got some DNA. We got some other things, and there's some evidence that we can analyze that'll help us on this case. It'll probably connect it to several others. And then on the other one is just what Chuck was talking about a while ago, these fictitious pickups, for lack of a better word, where there's games being played with the brokerage, and some of there's different aspects of, but one of them is just to go pick up a load, then deliver it to somewhere that's not the consignee, put it in a warehouse, and then it's sold to somebody else. And then the other is going to pick up product, and then before you deliver it, cross dock it, short it, and then deliver it. And again, that's become, on that case, I think our loss value is up over $20 million. But again, we're catching these guys. But one of the biggest problems we're getting into right now is a couple of these cases are becoming so big with so many different victims that we get concerned about, will a prosecutor take this case just because of the vastness of it? And also it's multi-jurisdictional. They need federal oversight because they're so massive in cases, but yet because you just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, we're kind of concerned the prosecutor might just kind of throw his hands up and say, okay, I'm only going to prosecute and try on these 12 cases rather than these 90. Things like that.
I got a couple of questions where some of these things are concerned. First thing first, I had a friend of mine, and we talked about this a little bit with Hank Seaton when he was on with us. He had there was another company that was putting themselves out as a dispatch service, and what they were doing, they had a similar name. They had a very similar name to what his company name was. Of course, his DOT numbers and MC numbers and all that was totally different. But actually, he didn't even have MC numbers or DOT numbers. And the people that he was contracting with as a dispatch service, when they was trying to get in contact with him, they would go to the FMCSA website and would look up by company name, and that's when my friend's company name would pop up, and they was calling. He was getting a bunch of phone calls about this particular dispatch service that was also using his name in a different state. Yeah, and so it was a lot of phishing stuff going on. So with stuff like that, and from when we were speaking with Hank, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit. How much I don't know how much interest is there from people with oversight and prosecution and stuff like that, because you're an investigator, you don't necessarily have arresting powers or things of that nature, or can convict anybody. So where does that stand as far as enforcement and actually putting some teeth to this thing to make it a deterrent?
Well, it's just sitting down with prosecutors and the people and making sure they understand the case is a very, very key thing. I mean, just what you said, they have to fully understand what's going on. And on some of these, when you've got double brokering involved, and it gets kind of complicated because you have a number of issues. First of all, the industry is so short right now of drivers, so it's almost like just get a warm body. And as we're seeing in some of these large trucking companies and brokerage companies, what they'll do is they'll put a load out for bid, and heaven forbid they can turn down the business. So what they'll do is, and most of them, I think we touched on this in the last episode that I was on, where they've all got automated systems. So if they put a load out for bid and they see that Rico Muhammad's trucking bids on it, they go, yeah, we know Rico, he's done several loads for us. Well, that ends their vetting process right there. They don't, it negates it. And had they dug down a little bit deeper, and they'd say, yeah, here's Rico Muhammad. But if they'd looked at that carrier packet that was submitted with the bid, they'd see a different telephone number. They'd see a different email address. And then they could stop it right there. But it's just such a hectic business right now and so frenetic that they're just trying to get the loads filled. And I know that I'm not trying to make excuses for them. It's just a reality.
Right. No, we're human. We're flawed. So it's definitely understandable.
But you know what? It's not even the human factor. It's the use of artificial intelligence. It's not really all that intelligent, or it would pick these things up. I think having these and everybody, all the large guys are doing it. They're depending on AI, where if you really had a set of eyes and somebody that was watching, they would catch it.
Yes, and the other thing that I think that some of these ones that haven't been victimized yet, and then I had one 2 weeks ago that called. It was brand new, and they had like 36 loads that were all out there missing, and they were recent. It was just within the last month, and of course, they think they're unique in that. And I understand it if you've never been hit before, but then when you start talking to them and saying, "No, this is happening all over the industry," and it's they're and they get in various states, like they get a report. Well, one driver delivered 5 of 20 pallets. Another one hasn't delivered yet. Another one says his truck's in a mechanic shop. We get all these different excuses, but the bottom line is, you've had 36 loads assigned, not one of them's been delivered in full yet. And then you have to start tearing back the layers, and it's the same group I was telling you about that's out in Southern California. And these guys the ironic thing, I got a case in about 3 weeks ago. And when I first thought it was the one group because it looked like the guy had been followed. He picked up one of the destinations where these are normally followed from.
Right.
Stopped at Love's Travel Stop, and went inside, came out, and his truck had been pilfered. And then what was funny, we started peeling back the layers of the case. Well, the driver had the same surname as our group of bad guys in Fontana. So I'm like, he's got to be the guy. Then we started looking at tracking data where all he had been, and it was kind of hard to figure out which one of the two thefts that actually applied to this case. But that's how goofy it's gotten with this, and just so much merchandise. And the other thing that we've noticed here lately too on this new group I was telling you about is that the commodity base that they haul is not traditional cargo that these guys have been interested in. The guys on these cross-docking loads and
Right.
the short deliveries, it's all been electronics. Now all of a sudden they're getting into other areas like home products, home care products, things like that. It's just been an abrupt switch that we haven't seen before. Again,
Is it because electronics have become tighter with their security, and these guys know that their risk increases when they go to steal electronics because all these companies they're tired of being ripped off and having their trucks ripped off and everything else. So I'm guessing they've probably increased security where somebody that was shipping hand lotion or, think of a can of shaving cream, good shaving cream. It's, good shaving cream is $7 to $10 in the store. And I'm sure these crooks have no problem getting rid of it at a flea market on a Sunday.
Sure, exactly. But there again, it also might be a thing that they've stolen so many electronic items that they're saturated with it, and they just got, need to get to another product because they've been so successful with the electronic loads that they've gotten in the last 2 years. I mean, it's just been a phenomenal amount of product that's disappeared. So, it's like I said, it's just, and we're seeing it across the board. And another thing I think we'll start seeing here, we haven't yet, but because of what happened in Florida with Hurricane Ian, I mean,
Right.
we know we're going to start seeing a lot of building supply thefts because of all the
Sure.
shingles and 2x4s and plywood that's going to be shipped down to that region, and that stuff. Like I said, these guys they're very good economists. They know what sells well, what's in demand. So,
Oh yeah, it's funny. Through the years, we've had the odd load ripped off from our own fleet, and luckily, it was a product of like no value to a fence. It was either it wasn't worth much, or what else happened was it was too bulky and heavy to bother with. These guys don't want to lift anything heavy. So they left it at the side of the road in Montreal, and as that Toronto Montreal corridor is a pretty busy one, and I think we were without the freight for about 3 weeks, and it appeared, and we got a call from the Quebec Provincial Police, come and get your trailer, and you owe us $100 a day for storage, regular stuff. But we were glad to get the trailer back.
I just want to jump in for just a quick second, just a little housekeeping. Just want to let our viewers and people know that if you have a question, we always welcome your interaction. You can click on the link, and that should bring you on board. If you want to join us via video, or if you don't want to do that, you just want to type your question and shoot it over to us. You can type it down in the chat, and we'll be able to see it and have access to it and we'll put it up on the screen for either Jeff or Chuck or myself to maybe take a stab at it. So don't feel bad if you got a question or if anything that you would like to know. There's no such thing as a dumb question. We welcome all interactions. So you can do that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe to the video. Like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate it. All that helps us get the video and messaging out to a broader audience. So we appreciate your help with that. All right.
Jeff, are there certain jurisdictions that seem to be harder on when they find these thieves, where they're a little bit more aggressive in sentencing and things like that, where these people don't operate, where it's safer, or is this pretty much same throughout North America?
No, there's definitely certain venues or more. Well, just for example, in my own backyard in Dallas, Fort Worth, for years, if law enforcement has their druthers, they'd much rather file charges in Tarrant County as opposed to Dallas, which Tarrant being Fort Worth, Dallas being Dallas County. Dallas County's just been traditionally more liberal when it comes to trying these cases, where Fort Worth is more conservative. And that goes on in different places throughout the United States. But I think on a lot of these cases, especially the ones that are becoming larger, where we've got multiple victims and multiple thefts, that's where you would rather get federal involvement because of just the vast size of the case. And like I said, also, we've had this happen a number of times where 3 trailers have been followed the same day. One's followed and then it gets boosted in Colorado. One gets boosted in Arizona, and one gets boosted in Nevada. So you got 3 different, all being shipped from the same venue in California, but all stolen in different states. So then you start getting those states involved as well. So that's where I think the federal oversight would become so valuable. And in the past, the FBI has always had a financial threshold that they would apply to a given case, or if they would get involved in a case, that they might work a case for 5 or 6 years until they got to the very top, and not really, of course, that doesn't do much for victims' commodities because that's been held the whole time. They don't get that product. Right. But now some of these others, like I know that Homeland Security's expressed an interest in our industry about when to get involved in cargo theft, and they're very, very welcome because, as I said, the need for some federal oversight on these cases are becoming very, very large and sophisticated. They beg for that kind of oversight.
Well, there used to be, if I'm not mistaken, at one time, there was a lot of federal oversight, and there's a law. I don't even know if most people realize it. It's probably still on the books. I don't think, tampering with an interstate load, or I think it's called tampering with an interstate shipment. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was more serious than, it wasn't as serious as murder, but it was more serious than kidnapping. And my understanding is that they don't go after them the way they used to. They just don't have the resources. Are they coming back to the game now?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Chuck, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, are the feds starting to, is there hope of them coming back into the game and prosecuting these crooks?
Well, I think the thing that changed everything, that what you're talking about, was 9/11. Once 9/11 happened, all the emphasis for the FBI, their top priority in the office is counterterrorism. Right. And as long as they could address their counterterrorism requirements and needs, they can pretty much go after whatever they desire. And that's what we've found with certain agents. We've got a couple of agents in the United States that do nothing but cargo theft, but like in a certain office. But historically here, ever since 9/11, it has to be a very, very big case, and usually something that's involving organized crime, large dollar theft figures, and usually down in Miami. That's where we're seeing most of the FBI involvement in cargo theft cases. We get occasionally out in Los Angeles, but I think that they also understand, and they've been very helpful. As a matter of fact, I worked one in Amarillo years ago, back when fictitious was at its peak, back in 2011 to 2014. Right. Where an FBI agent out of Amarillo, I went and talked to him about it, and he said, I didn't know anything about cargo theft, but I'm interested. And he goes, if you'll work with me and kind of guide me, I'll be more than happy to get these cases filed federally. Wow. And we did. And matter of fact, while I was working up on a bunch of frozen meat cases up in that part of the country, one of the brokers was a victim, said, I think I'm being targeted. And I said, well, send me your paperwork. And I looked at it and said, yes, you are. So then we had to pick up, I think, within 48 hours in Holcomb, Kansas. And I called the FBI agent and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "It's very simple. Can you just take a team of agents out there, let them uplift the load, and then just pinch the guys as soon as they pull away?" Because at this point, we had never, ever identified one. And when they did that, and he sent me the driver's license, and it was the same guys that we'd been out in California. And then we turned around and had investigators go out there and visit all the other victims. There's about 40 of them. We had 48 counts against those guys, and those guys got arrested. They were brothers named Nepetian. They were Armenians out of California, and they're both doing 25 years in prison now. So that's a difference when you get the federal, get the federal teeth in some of these cases. It's more than just a red slap.
Well, that was going to be a question that I had. How much if you get to the point of getting law enforcement and things, those guys involved, typically what kind of penalties are levied against the culprits in these types of cases?
It's better now than it was, Rico, because there's been a number of efforts from different states, and I know here in Texas, we've got what's called the Southwest Transportation Security Council, and for about 3 or 4 years, there was a member of our council that did nothing but attend sessions down in Austin to push cargo theft legislation, and made it so that it is pretty serious now. It's not just a slap on the wrist, and there's been a few other states that have fallen in line. And I know that's one of the pushes in this that's talked about all the time, is to get with your, in each state, get with your local politicians and make it. That's one of the biggest problems. Politicians just don't understand it. We know the numbers, we hear the numbers, and of course we all raise our eyebrows at high numbers. But one of the things I've noticed over the years, I've said, well, it'd be nice to get a congressman into one of our meetings and just listen to all the theft that goes on, so they realize the dollar amount involved. But I think most of them just kind of shrug it off until they're actually presented with it, and they see how serious it is and what, and domino effects. I mean, hell, when you're getting that kind of theft, it starts to affect everything price wise.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things, is just getting people to understand what it is. But as you guys both well know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You wanted people to know about it, but yet you can't publicize it too much, because hell, no trucking company, hell, Rico, if it's one of your trucks, you don't want it all about their publicized. You've lost an entire FTL of Dell computers. You don't.
Right.
But you know what, though, Jeff? Maybe what we do want to do is, the trucking industry, I don't think we do things right sometimes as an industry. I think that I don't think we educate the public enough. And I don't think the public realizes that cargo theft costs them. Because at the end of the day, nobody loses the money but the consumer. Whether it's a load of computers or a load of shaving cream or hair dryers, when that load gets stolen, somebody's paying for it. At the end, somebody's going to raise their price.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I think once that victimization gets to your local consumer, then things will happen. But until it does, they kind of shrug their shoulders and kind of laugh it off, and they'll have kind of, well, that's too bad. But if it becomes them, and you'll find that a lot of times the first time I see these mid-sized brokers and trucking companies, when they become victimized for the first time, they put their heart and soul in their business, and their dollar margin is pretty narrow. So when they have a loss, it kills them. And man, they're as angry as can be about finding out how did it happen, when did it happen, and then you get into a lot of things. Like, I think, Chuck, when you started the show, you brought up a good point. And I dealt with this here. I just got back from I was in Jacksonville, and just last night I was just got back from Louisville on thefts, where both of them were just layups for the thieves. I mean, when you've got FTLs one was an FTL and one was an FCL, that are staged against a warehouse where there's no security, there's no fence, there's no gate, there's nothing. What's to stop a thief? I mean, even if somebody is driving by and sees a driver back up to a trailer, hell, he thinks that the driver is legitimate. He's doing nothing wrong. But they take off. Nobody realized the thefts that has occurred in both these cases are $1 million losses.
And it's funny. If a crook is out there with a tractor and he's looking for something, he'll gladly take an empty trailer because that's worth money.
Yeah, right.
He
Right.
can't go wrong. If it's empty, it's worth money. If it's God forbid, it's loaded with used tires or something. Now he's got to deal with them. He'll probably leave that one parked at the side of the road. But anything else, they really can't lose. I remember years ago, drivers used to drop their trailer at a truck stop, and then go to town or go to the movies or do whatever. You dare not do that stuff now. Although the odd time I still am seeing trailers left, in a yard with no security, and I'm going to presume that the insurance companies are really starting to frown on that stuff.
Oh, that no, they do, and it's not just yards; it's streets. I mean, we just had a case out in California just last month where the driver left a load of apparel parked along the street out in Fontana, and there's
Oh,
a cargo thief out there. That's all he does. He just goes around his crew and they look for sealed loads being parked that way, and they'll boost them, and they get a lot of loads that way. And it's very easy because they know that because of the um, the way the supply chain is now, and it's just the way that the business runs. It's not uncommon for somebody to pull up to one of these large distribution centers and say they're 15 minutes late. Well, they're going to say, "Wait, sorry, you got to come back tomorrow." Well, those guys have got all that time to kill before they can make that delivery. So what do? They try to go somewhere that can accommodate their rig, and often they can't find a place, so
yeah.
they'll come back and they'll park it like across the street from the big DC because it's got wide streets. They'll put a kingpin lock on it. Well, that's what this guy looks for. And again, it's the driver's not a thief. He's just not made a good decision. And we're seeing that all the time. And it's always been a problem.
Well, you know what? It's a horrible decision, but sometimes people's backs are up against the wall. He wasn't counting on laying over in Fontana or wherever, and
Correct.
he doesn't have food for that night or change of clothes or anything. Can't get into the truck stop because it's totally packed. And what does he do? He has human needs. He's got to eat. There's no place for him to even go. So what does he do? You know what? I'll just put it there and I'll do the responsible thing and I'll put a kingpin lock on. Well, we all know about kingpin locks. Um, we've all seen drivers hook up to a trailer with a kingpin lock
Right.
and drive away because, no offense against the people that make kingpin locks, but nobody's made a good one yet because they seem to be a beacon for thieves. When a crook sees a trailer with a kingpin lock, that's the first one he's going to take.
Yeah. And it's still the amount of drivers that are first time victims, it's still never
Oh
ceases
yeah,
to amaze me. When they're actually shocked. They've been a driver for maybe 20 years, never had a theft. And they've
yeah,
done the same thing they've always done. They're like, well, I couldn't find a place, so I drove up and I found a wide place in the road and parked my trailer and went out and had dinner and then came back and my trailer's gone. And they're shocked. They'll drive around thinking, well, maybe I didn't park it here or somewhere else. And like I said, those guys aren't bad guys. They just didn't make the good decisions. But and that we see that time after time. Same way with these loads where there's strict protocols. The time of pickup, if team drivers required,
right.
they both have to be at the time of uplift, full tank of gas, don't stop the first 250 miles, which all things are very good theft prevented maintenance. But they sign the paper, and then next thing you know, they stop 100 miles down the road and go out and decide the truck stop together, and the load gets boosted. And we see that all the time.
Yeah.
How often, if say if you have a situation where they steal the entire kit and caboodle, truck, trailer, the whole nine, how often are those things recovered? As far as maybe not the cargo, but what about the equipment, so to speak? Do you guys have any pretty good, decent success rate in getting those things recovered, or is it pretty much if it gets stolen, it's pretty much a hang it up for everything?
No, the equipment almost always gets recovered. They're not interested in the equipment 99% of the time.
Okay.
Equipment, they don't want to get stuck to stolen equipment. And a lot of these thefts we had here lately, Some of them are pilfered, and some of them the entire rig's taken. But the equipment's usually always recovered.
Okay.
It's not. So that's not really an issue.
I would imagine so, because with a lot of the stuff now, especially with the newer trucks, you got a lot more tracking and stuff like that available with the e-logs and things of that nature.
Yeah, then there's some very good tracking companies in the United States now that they can't be 100% because you can always go behind a mountain or something where they might be out of range for a couple of minutes and you don't get the exact address. But there's pretty good coverage on a couple of them now that give us a very good idea when they're tracking these loads. And that's helped a lot because, I mean, it's a breadcrumb trail that we can connect things
Right.
and figure out, it was out of sight for 2 minutes, but, there's Jose's truck leasing over there. It's awfully coincidental. It's right here where that's happened. And we might have had 3 or 4 loads that went in that area and all disappeared in that area. So just through, connecting the dots, you figure out what's going on. So it's, there's a lot of good technology out there that helping with that kind of information these days.
So there's definitely more of an emphasis on the cargo in particular versus the equipment. Not really running into like a trucking chop shop network or nothing like that.
Oh yeah, I mean there's those issues going as well, but mostly what we're dealing with anymore is a theft of product. That goes on all the time though, Rico, in certain neighborhoods. There's no doubt about that. I mean, especially down in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Chicago. Yeah, there's still chop shop operations that go on.
Did you see a huge uptick in theft when they were, like, I know in California, for example, they were parking a lot of equipment, especially ocean containers, on the street. Were people helping themselves to that?
Yeah, but they had no choice because they had nowhere else to put them.
Right, I know that. Yeah.
Let me turn. You get, that's just from overcrowding. You would have these different. It almost became comical because you'd go in a certain place and there'd just be containers everywhere.
Yeah, I saw that. Now, were the steamship lines at that point, was anybody providing security for those containers that were sitting there?
They tried. Sometimes they would, but sometimes it was just impossible. You might have a guard in the yard, but he couldn't really see what was going on outside, and might have a golf cart to try to make rounds. But still, these guys are very wise on. Of
course.
They'll work in teams. I mean, they'll watch a guard and do distractions and use a lot of trade crafts. So that's not really a challenge to these guys at all. If they have a container they really want to go after.
Yeah, I remember seeing. I think 60 Minutes did a special on the trains were out there in California were being really targeted out on the train yards out there,
right,
with vandalism and theft and stuff of that nature.
Well, and then that gets into a whole different area. Especially when we start talking about these trains they're stopped out in the desert, like you get out around Barstow, and they'll just come out and we've a lot of times looked at, are those things being targeted? And they're not, because they have no idea what's in those. They just get in there and just start rummaging, cutting, and they've got all kinds of cutting tools and torches to cut the locks, and they just get in there and start looking. We've had firearms being stolen, electronics, and that's the stuff in the desert. That's cartel. That's guys from Mexico come up doing that. And so now I think when you get into the inner cities, it's different. You're talking about some gangs, but when you're talking about all these hits that are happening out in the middle of the desert, that's very organized crime. That's cartel.
They will ship. They'll ship things like firearms on the rail.
Sure. Yeah, we had. I had one that was shipped out of Nevada that took motor truck transit down to San Bernardino and put on a train, and that's exactly what happened. The train stopped right outside of Barstow, and they started rummaging through one of the cars and then came across them and took damn near to 1,000 firearms. So that's because everything's shipped by rail. So who knows what they're going to find when they start looking into boxcars.
Right.
because everything's shipped. So, and they know this. But now, that's those train incidents are not isolated to any certain part of the country. I mean, you guys are probably Memphis has been hit very, very hard too by that. There's street gangs down there that do the same thing. They just wait till those trains are stopped in the yards, and people sometimes think, well, how can this happen? Well, most of us probably haven't had the benefit of being in train yards, and you don't realize how vast they can be.
Yeah,
They might,
they're the
yeah,
size of a town. People don't
exactly.
realize they're
Yeah.
big.
You know, 2 or 3, even 4 agents, they can't cover that whole area. They
Right.
just, when you're dealing with gangs, you've got 8 or 9, 10, 15 people that have got communication, and hey, we know where this guy's at, we know where that guy's at, but let's hit this car. And they're very good at that. They do it all the time.
Interesting. Interesting. So how big is you had mentioned organized crime, that so is is that still really the mafia and stuff like that? Are they really still highly involved in a lot of truck stuff and truck theft and things of that nature as well?
It's funny you ask that because somebody's asked me that the other day, and not the mafia. Ours is much more, for lack of a better word, really ethnic gangs. I mean, the way
Yeah.
we kind of look
Okay.
at it, the way it's divided up, that a lot of the stuff we're seeing with the manipulation of BOLs and fictitious pickup is Eastern Europeans.
Right.
And then don't take this wrong. There's plenty of white Anglo-Saxons that are criminals too. But I mean,
Of course, but yeah,
when we look at the gangs that we've like I told you, this group out in California was Ecuadorian. That they were very, very good at what they do. There's a group of Indians that are big on the of this BOL manipulation and cross docking of loads. And then, of course, up in Chicago, you've got the Gangsta Disciples, which is a street gang that's very
Right.
big in theft. So, and then in Dallas, we've got our own issues with local street gangs in South Dallas that have been involved that are historical cargo thieves. So just in Atlanta, same way. But talking about like Costa Nostra and organized crime that we've seen movies about,
Right.
no, that's something that doesn't really enter into.
well, really, guys, if you look at it, what was the mafia really? It was an ethnic gang.
Right.
It happened to be made up of, originally it was made up of 5 Italian families, right? Originally, and then things changed, and now you've got all these other ethnicities that weren't necessarily in North America at the time that have come over since, and first generation, they don't, they're at a disadvantage, and some of them turn to crime.
Exactly, and the main reason it's always done with cargo crime is, like we've always said, it's very low risk, high reward.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. I was getting ready to say. So it makes it it sounds as if this is a very good little niche to get into, for lack of a better term, because of the lack of enforcement, the lack of prosecution, things of that nature, and it just kind of like just glides by because of people are just not really aware of it so much.
Yeah, and there's been no doubt that certain things have happened historically over the last 4 or 5 years has really hurt the industry. I mean, when all the rioting was going on in this country, all those detectives that are assigned to cargo theft, they couldn't do it. I harken back to a case we had in Southern California where it was a $7.5 million hard drive theft, and we couldn't get a detective to respond. We couldn't get a police report taken.
Wow.
Because and I'm talking about guys that are friends that would drop and do everything. They said, we can't. We've been assigned to tactical. So they have to go out there and let people spit on them and throw bricks at them while they're in the uniforms. They couldn't do their jobs other than just that. That's what they were assigned to. And that went on for a long, long time. And then from that, with all this reimagining of the police and defunding the police and all that, well, that's kind of how we've got to where we're at right now. And now, what are the politicians saying now? They're all running for the upcoming election. You're seeing a lot more emphasis put on pro police to get back to the way it was, so we can get back to some sanity here with law enforcement.
Yeah, it's funny. I've got a relative that sells real estate in Vancouver, British Columbia, And she said that her biggest customers right now are people coming in from California, particularly Los Angeles, that want to get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
They go, you know what, the horror stories I'm hearing now. Of course, I'm hearing them secondhand, but besides from the bad government and weather and everything else, forest fires, and then sometimes you get floods, crime has gone crazy.
No, it has, and then a good example is like just last week we've had some really good breaks on a couple of really big cases we've been working with out in California, especially in the Inland Empire.
Right.
And the two guys out there that are just great detectives, and they're young guys that work their ass off. And we had a tip about that we knew that 5 loads went to this warehouse, and said, "Are you guys aware of it?" And they said, "Yeah, we are." And said, "Do you guys have a plan?" Because there's things. A lot of times, a client might be pushing me to say, "Hey, we know about this. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything about it until I talk to law enforcement, because it's
Right.
their case. I don't want to get in their way. If they're saying they're not going to do anything and clear it with them, then yeah, we'll do something. But it's their case. I don't want to walk into the middle of something that they've been planning on and blow their whole cable."
Right. Of course.
So we discuss, we work together on those things. But on a lot of these cases, they'll say, "Jeff, we just can't. We know about it. We can't do anything about it right now because cargoes are part of our game, but we're also involved in major crime." And we just had a case where it was a cargo case, but the guy ended up getting murdered. So that's become top priority.
Wow.
So things like that just simply get in the way, and it's not really anybody's fault. There's a lot of frustration because if it's your 11 loads that have went there and you're anxious and you've got clients telling you want something done, but it's just the reality of it right now with like I said, there's a lot of lack of resources. It's not a lack of effort by the people involved. It's just that they've just got their limitations right now.
Wow. Sorry to hear that it's gotten to this point. Now, are you getting involved much on the fraud side? Because there's an awful lot of fraud going on at the same time on the other end, where carriers are getting ripped off, brokers are getting ripped off, all sorts of, and some of the stuff I'm hearing is it's actually, I have to give these guys credit. It's ingenious of the fraudsters, and if these people put their effort into running legitimate businesses, they would be massive empires. They would give the C.H. Robinsons a run for their money. These guys are brilliant.
No, it is, and just figuring it out sometimes. Like I'll give you an example. We had one out in California where a load of $2.1 million of IR cameras got picked up fictitiously. And when I got the case, there's a large loss and there was a lot of concern. It was getting a lot of attention. And when you start looking into how this happened, it was at a temporary warehouse. It only had 2 products in it: IR cameras and solar panels.
Right.
So I went up there and looked. There was cameras, but they weren't operable. And then when I was up there, the guy said, "There's only 2 things in there: IR cameras and solar panels." There were a lot more IR cameras in there than solar panels. So then I said, "Tell me exactly what the genesis was of the brokerage." They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Tell me exactly how the brokerage occurred. Who called who? Was it email? Was it electronic? Was it phone? What documents were used?" And the ironic thing about it, when we found out what the document was used, that it was put up on the load board, but the document that was sent to the carrier to pick up the load was simply a rate confirmation. All it had on it was who the shipper was and who the consignee was in Aurora, Colorado. It listed nothing on there. It did not describe what the commodity was. So it makes it, well, how in the hell did the driver know what he was picking up? How do you know to go there to get that load? Now, I know that they could, if they're getting off the load board, they could look and see who the consignee is and Google it and see what they do. And they could look and see who the consignee is, and then they can do the same thing.
If it's a warehouse, you know what? If you're picking it up at a warehouse facility, you're delivering to a warehouse facility, it could be anything. It could be a load of chemicals or used tires. You don't know.
Right. Exactly. And so then it bears the question: did they just get lucky and get $2.1 million load of cameras, or did they know they were there? And then, as most of those things happen, as things work through, I'm out there again, and I get a call one night, and there's a load of tires that I'm able to recover out in Fontana at a warehouse. And it was a load that was picked up and then taken right next door to a warehouse and delivered. But the consignee was actually in Medford, Oregon. So we went there, found the tires, and once it was all done, we got arrangement for another truck to be there and translate the tires from one to another. And when it was over, I said, "I'm going to seal put on this." And this guy was up there, and He said, "Oh, I have no seal." I said, "Oh, horse shit." I said, "You got a big warehouse there. Get a seal and put on there." So then he's like, "Well, this happens all the time." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What's your gig here?" He said, "No, that load was going from right next door was at the tires 3PL. It was going to Medford, Oregon. Why is it being brought to right next door to your warehouse and stored?" He goes, "Oh, I do that all the time. I don't ask questions." He goes, "I just do that, and then we store it. And then if we have to transload it, we charge absorbent fees for both, and we make money." Well, we've taken a very close look at this place now and found a number of loads going in there. So I think we're starting to kind of figure out a part of what this game is. But but the point I'm trying to make, to figure all this out may take 7, 8, 9 loads before you start to get the picture and can trace them all back to that place to figure out what's going on. And during that conversation with this guy, he said, "Yeah," he goes, "I get quite a few solar panel loads come in here." Well, then the light bulb goes off your brain. Well, maybe weren't there to pick up the IR cameras. They thought they were there to pick up solar panels. And they just happened to pick up the IR cameras instead. Then it all kind of starts to make sense. And you rack your brain trying to figure out how they found out about these cameras. And I think that they didn't. I think they were actually over there to get solar panels, but they ended up getting cameras instead. But like I said, it takes a while to figure all that stuff out. It's because you just have no way of knowing. I mean, when these things are put up on the load board, there's very little information these days. And the thing I can figure out is the bad guys must just they might look up there and pick 10 loads and then research them and then find the most desirable ones to go pick up. That's something I can figure out. So, but we're still looking at that. That's something that's kind of baffling us right now.
Are there, and I'm looking at the time, Jeff, and we appreciate you for taking time, being so gracious with your time with us tonight. When it comes to prevention, once again, figuring out ways to try to eliminate and protect ourselves, to insulate ourselves as best we possibly can, what are some best practices that we might be able to do? Is there anything new that might be that's come down that we might be able to install in our operations or incorporate into our operation to help make us not such an easy target to be a victim of these types of crimes?
Well, I think one of the things that could be done that's not, I think a lot, especially in California, I've noticed that they're always afraid they're going to make the driver mad. And I mean, if a shipper, I think they have the right, they could say, they could do simple things like demand that a guy gives a thumbprint to pick up a load, and make sure you get a picture of his driver's license.
Right.
Common sense things like that. All the information you can about the rig involved, the truck, the VIN number, the trailer, the VIN number, the unit numbers of both, license plates numbers of both. Like I said, a good picture of the driver, and also make, like I said, maybe a thumbprint, and that would reduce a lot. And then also the following of the protocol. Like I said, these companies all have great ideas on protocols. That's the first thing you say. Well, yeah, they weren't supposed to stop for the first 250 miles. Well, I know they weren't, but they stopped after the first 100. I mean, there's got to be, I think, stricter penalties on these drivers for not adhering to what their agreed upon protocols are. And then also, if it can be, but as you guys well know, in a perfect world on these loads, especially in Southern California, but the same thing applies all over the country. If it can be same day delivery, pick up in the morning and delivery by the afternoon. But so many of these, it's late afternoon pickup and then next day delivery. So these guys are forced to do something with that load overnight. And, they're going to take it to a yard that's halfway between or close to where they live. And they're going to either bobtail home, leave the trailer there, or park the rig and take their personal vehicle home. When they do, they've been following those guys. It's easy pickings for them to break in and steal loads. So that would be one thing. Another thing that would help. And also secured yards. We've talked about this in the past, what people believe are secured yards and what a secured yard actually is. If you've got somebody that's got 24/7 security, where you've got a guard at a gate,
Yeah.
you've got one point of ingress egress that's writing down everything that goes in and goes out. You're probably not going to have very many thefts go out, but that's a lot of people think a secured yard is just having an electronic gate that you got maybe 40 drivers that all have the access code, and if some driver leaves, they don't change the code, so they could give that to anybody. Those aren't secured loads; they're secured yards, and we see this all the time. So, and then also tracking devices certainly do help out, but there becomes a cost factor. Where do you draw the line? Say, well, everything over $750,000, we'll put a tracking device on. So that means if the load goes out and gets stolen, it's worth $650. It didn't get a tracking device. Still a very high value and valuable load. So those are just a few things that would help. But like I said, more than anything else would be same day delivery. That would eliminate a lot of the problems that we see all the time. But it's just not feasible, I think, on the shipper's part to
Oh,
complete.
and the distances throughout the country are severe. And, driver gets there, he can get there at 9 in the morning to do the pickup. But you know what? If it takes 7 or 8 hours to load 20 skids, and don't ask me how it takes 7 or 8 hours to load 20 skids, but I've seen it a lot in my life.
Yeah,
And by that time, you know what? The driver's been on the clock all day. He's not driving 250 miles. He's already worked all day.
correct. No, you're exactly right. And and like I said, it's one that's not meant to criticize the drivers. A lot of drivers, as I always told people, I said the driver doesn't make any more money on the load that he's hauling that's worth 1.2 million than it is one that's worth 12,000. He gets
You
paid the
got it.
same amount of money, and that
Yeah.
so when you look at that way, it's just cargo, because they're saying, well, God, how could that guy be so lackadaisical about $1 million load? Well, shit, to him, they're all the same. He's going to get paid the same despite the dollar amount of load he's hauling. So a lot of times these guys don't even know the value. We see it all the time where uh, a load for $1 million gets picked up by a carrier that's only got $100,000 of cargo liability insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Had they known from the broker what was valued, they would never pick that load up. But then
And
once
they may have signed, you know what? And that carrier may have signed that he is going to be responsible for that $1 million.
yeah, exactly.
That happens a lot. And then you hear about, you hear these stories about a carrier that has $1 million loss and $100,000 insurance, and the customer or the broker goes after him as a result for the balance that he signed for that he had.
You're right, exactly. And
So
then
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought. I
it-
got another quick question.
when these things happen, that's when all the finger pointing starts. And then and then I see it all the time, and it's frustrating because it's just simply a lack of communication. And I don't know if it's because somebody's forgotten, or they're doing so many things, they're juggling so much they forgot to tell somebody. But it's just simply a matter of communication. Like, oh yeah, by the way, that's a high value electronics load. Are you properly insured? And then some of these have things where they'll have a flyer that's attached to the load that ups the insurance. So there's different ways that around that, but it just takes, like I said, it's all about communication.
Jeff, I got to ask you a question here, and this came up one day. It was a call in, and I thought it was a great question. They put it out. It was actually on Sirius on the Trucker Channel. If a load is valuable and it's worth $1.2 million, should the driver know that what he is picking up? And they put it out there, and I said, yes, regardless, the driver should drive the same, whether he's got a $20,000 load or a $10 million load. It's still a load, and it should be treated the same. It's not your stuff. And as a driver, you are the custodian of it during your care and control. But as a private investigator, what's your opinion on that?
I think you're better off the driver knows, and there's no secrets. He knows exactly what he's hauling and exactly what it's worth, but also make sure that load is properly being monitored, because then he knows that somebody's watching him. And that way he knows if he stops without giving fair warning, somebody's going to be, hey, what are you stopping for? I think that's the only way to do that. Now, sure, you take a risk of the guy, hey, I know I got a high value load, I can make arrangements to steal it. But if you're going to have a load that high dollar value, you're going to have very, very extensive tracking on that. And he's going to be aware of that. And he knows somebody's watching every move he makes. I think that's the only way to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that if you run a trucking company and you're going to handle a $1.2 million load, you want to make sure you have somebody there that's competent to take it. You're not going to give it to some driver you don't know that you just hired the day before, and this is his first run.
Oh, I agree. I saw it. We had 3 loads that left a shipper out in Brea, California. This is going back about 10 years ago. And it was a big trucking company. They didn't want to lose the business. So they think, oh my God, we're out of power. What are we going to do? Well, they assigned 3 local carriers that they could get. And 2 of the loads were mock-up loads, carrying mock-up product, which had very little value. Another was 8 million cell phones. Well, the guy that's pulling the $8 million of cell phones had no idea. He was a Kentucky driver. Not that has anything to do with it, but he was a driver for Kentucky had only had $100,000 worth of liability insurance. He didn't have any idea what he was pulling. So even then, you're actually putting that driver at risk because he's got bad guys that are following him. 3 people in 3 different vehicles a game.
Bingo.
Oh,
100%. You're putting the driver
Yeah.
at risk because he may, you know what, he's got to know so that he can be that much more aware.
Exactly. And he was totally oblivious. Totally oblivious.
Yeah.
You're right. And they followed him for 750 miles until he stopped at a truck stop and went in for a shower, and then they boosted his load, took it. And it's just kind of funny in that particular case. We got lucky because we had some very good video. It was a truck stop right in a place called Milan, New Mexico. If you guys ever saw the movie Cars, the Pixel films, that was Radiator Springs. That's Milan, New Mexico, just like it. And when we started watching the video, we saw 3 different vehicles, and I put out a bolo, and a guy's kind of a good friend, Paul Meyer, with the FBI in New Albany, Indiana, called me. He said, "Jeff, could that have been a BMW?" I said, "Yeah, it could have been. It was very, very aerodynamic." Well, Paul does a lot of this, and it was a gang of Cubans out of Louisville that he recognized that car, and about 2 weeks later, they did an interdiction stop on that car and found $20,000, the label to that address where those came from, and some other information to the rest of the guys. So it's just the, it's funny how you're when you have a good network and you piece things together, what the results are sometimes. But back to Rico's point, and I totally agree. You kind of have to stop and think about that. As if you're a broker, think about the driver. Do you really want to put him in that position where he's hauling a high dollar value load that he has no clue about, and he's going to be just as lackadaisical, or maybe not lackadaisical is the right word, but he's not as aware as he should be.
Yeah, I agree. Like even where you stop at night, when you're running out of hours, if you know you've got an expensive load, then you're that much more diligent to make sure you're going to stop at a safer place.
Correct.
I got a quick question, and Jeff, if you'd be so kind, look like we may have a viewer that wants to jump in and get involved with us here for a second. So we're going to go ahead and welcome him to the show. Good evening, Landis. Welcome to the show. What's your question? How can we help? We're not sure if we got audio on you, Landis. Is your microphone on? No, we don't
Better
have.
Type it out there, Landis.
Yeah, you might have to type it. We don't have any audio.
We can't hear you, my friend.
Yeah, you might have to type it out. We appreciate it. But while he's typing it out, question to you, Jeff, is there anything that you would recommend as far as any type of deterrence that you see that are probably worthwhile, or these guys just that sophisticated, don't matter what you got in form of a lock or anything like that may help assist and prevent someone from being able to steal the equipment outright?
Well, if I think it's kind of twofold, Rico. If we're talking about what some of these thefts have been, I've told you about since 2020, where there's been over 100. Some of those involve pilfering, just pulling up while the guys in a yard, and they'll pilfer as much as they can and take off, or steal the whole trailer. But in that case, obviously, if you're in their tractor, if you can back up to something that's solid, a wall or anything, that would prevent that right there. They could not pilfer if you're backed up against a solid surface.
Right.
And then with because it happens all the time where these thefts occur where the drivers are in the back of the cab, and they've got their TV on, they've probably got headphones on, they can't hear what's going on in the back of the truck. So that's one thing that could be done. But like I said, the other thing is if you've got team drivers, and we see this all the time, then truly use the team drivers. The whole purpose of a team driver is for the load to never be left alone. And we see it all the time where the drivers go in to eat together at a truck stop, or like in this case in Lake Havasu, the drivers were in the cab. They were in the back of the cab when this pilferage went on, and these, I think they had a load of about $8 million, and the thieves got over $1 million of hard drives in very little time because they're in the back. They've got their earphones on and their headsets on or whatever, and they couldn't hear what was going on. And thank goodness now. And also there's, I think on this particular load that I'm talking about in Lake Havasu that really helped us out a lot was it was being monitored. So as soon as the trailer door was lifted, it set off a remote alarm to a company then called the Mojave County Sheriff's Office, who just happened to have a deputy who was rolling by there. So it was like
Wow.
he got the alarm and he drives over. And he actually drives up on these guys. So anything like that, those any kind of deterrence like that help. They help a lot. They really do. It's a lot better than just going out there blind. And I see that, like, sometimes we see these loads, like I just saw, trying to think where I was at just the other day, where we had a load that went out and it had it was $1 million load, but had nothing on it. I mean, no tracking device, no nothing. And
Wow.
you just have to kind of scratch your head and goes, how's that possible? How can you, in a good conscience, ship a load that's got $1 million of product and have no protection on it whatsoever?
Because they're thinking that the trucker has insurance.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking. And just like that trucker I spoke to today, this whole thing of living in denial. And, these guys, what do you mean it's not insured? Well, it's not, because you know what? The insurance company would say, well, do you do this, this, and this? Mr. Shepard, you're partially at fault.
Right.
Especially when one of these fraudulent drivers shows up and with a stolen truck and stolen trailer, or at least stolen license plates, loads the load, and instead of taking it to the actual consignee, takes it to a warehouse somewhere in Philadelphia, offloads it to to the fence market there. And then the shipper's saying, well, what happened?
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. I was just getting ready to wrap us up. We're looking at the time. I don't want to keep you all night.
I was just going to say that the thing that, and I go this with the clients all the time, when somebody initially gets hit, especially if it's multiple times, they think they're being targeted. And I guess in a way they are, but they're not being targeted any differently than anybody else is. That's what they have to understand. Because time after time, when we get a case, when I see the trailer's been stolen from a specific shipper, my first question was how many trailers went out that day? And most people are like, well, hell, I don't know. I have any idea. And I said, well, that's kind of key. And they're like, well, what difference does it make? I said, well, it makes all the difference in the world, because if there's somebody inside tipping loads, let's look at how many went out that day. If 5 trailers went, let's look at the BOLs of all 5 and look at the value. And I think, like I was telling you a while ago, when we had those 3 thefts that happened in 3 different states, one Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada, 2 of those 3 they took. One of them they left because the load had 20 pallets of monitors and 3 pallets of notebook computers, virtually a valueless load. So that tells me, like it always does in most of these cases, these thieves know brand, they don't know content.
Right.
So, and that's a key thing to remember. And there are exceptions to that, but I'm saying 99.9% of these cases, they're going strictly by brand. They just don't know exactly what the content is. But because why would you take that kind of time and physical resources to follow loads, going damn near 700, 800 miles, and then just give it up because it's not what you wanted and you didn't know.
Right. Okay. Well. There he is. Okay, I thought we had froze up for a second there. But Jeff, I wanted to before we get out of here, if you wanted to share your information, let people know how they could get in contact with you, if you wanted to. You feel free to do so. If you want to, if anybody has a question or would like to get in contact with you, you can feel free to share your information if you like. But if not, I completely understand that too.
There you are. Were you asking about if I wanted to give out the telephone number or something?
Yeah, whatever if you want to give out a telephone number or anything like that.
Or company website, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, well, like I said, the name of our company, Risk Management, and like I said, we're based out of Long Beach, California. Me personally, I'm based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We do work all over the country, and I think our main office in Long Beach is 562-436 9000, and then my number is 817-233-8158, and like I said, you can call 24/7. And then just for the people out there that might be watching, there's a couple of pretty big cargo theft conferences coming up that would benefit anybody that's in the industry. There'll be a lot of law enforcement, insurance people, brokers. One's going to be on the 25th of October in Glendora, California, put on by NICB, the National Crime Insurance Bureau. And then there'll be one in November 9 and 10 in Monrovia, put on by Travelers and CargoNet, that will 2 days of training, speeches given. As a matter of fact, my partner, Curtis Salisbury, will be doing a presentation on theft south of the border on that conference. It will be very interesting because there's a lot of things that are different about cargo theft in Mexico than it is here in the United States. And I just don't mean the method, but I mean there's a lot of procedures and paperwork and stuff that's just necessary that you have to adhere to and file in Mexico that doesn't exist here in the United States. So it's a very good learning process.
I'm sure.
Landis wants to know: do you guys have any type of ebook or any kind of information available that you know of that's available in a downloadable format, maybe?
Have him leave his name and number, and there's some things that we could send him. Yes.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. We'll get that and try to get that over to you at a later time. Well, that being said, Chuck, let the good people know how they can get a hold of you.
Well, if anybody needs me, best way to get me is send me an email, chuck@traffics.com. If you have any questions about the industry, you're having some challenges, or you want to get set up at one of the Traffics offices, I will personally hold your hand and take you and introduce you to the right people. And with that, Rico, I'm going to let you back in the hole for another week. Jeff, I want to thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure. It's always very enlightening. Unfortunately, we have to talk about these things because they're a fact of life. And I wish that somehow you didn't have to do what you do, that people were honest, but that never happened in this world in the last 1,000 years or so, maybe before that.
Well, like I said, I always enjoy spending time with you guys, and anytime you want, just call me. But we, as I was telling the person on the plane last night flying home from Louisville, you can't try to save the whole world. You can only do your part and hope that it has an effect on others. That's what we try to do. We do the best we can on what we have to work with, and then we have some victories. But it's not it's not. There's just so much of it going on out there. There's only so much you can do. And you just do your
Jeff,
best.
we can save the world. We just can't save all the people in it.
That's right. But it's all right. It's always great being with you guys. You guys take care.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. We want to thank you guys. Of course, like Chuck said, thank you guys. Thanks out to Jeff being so gracious with the time. And but most of all, and most importantly, we want to thank you guys, our viewers and subscribers. We appreciate your time. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little bit of time to hang out with us, and we are always eternally grateful for you doing so. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, next week, same time, same place. Not quite sure who we're going to have as a special guest yet. I got a couple of ideas, but we're going to discuss it and we'll let you guys know who we'll have on. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. God bless you and good night. We'll talk at the same time, same place next week.
Catch on the flip flop. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Good night, gentlemen.
Bye.